Do you think, with the demographic shifts occurring, obviously the millennials and Gen Zers, I have a lot of friends, I mean, shoot, even myself, I own an investment real estate, but I don't own where I live, and I love renting. It's amazing. And, I get to kind of bounce around and live in these different high rises, and it's great. And when I get over it, I can just throw them the keys and I go get the next place, put a $500 deposit down. I typically get 1 month free, and it's a lot cheaper to rent than it is to own, in most markets right now. And so for me, it makes a lot of sense. Plus, buying a high-rise condo is just not a great investment. It is not a great fucking investment in most markets, HOAs and all this bullshit you gotta deal with. So for me, I like renting. Do you think, with the demographics and the millennials and the Gen Zers, do you think that as these demographics get older and the baby boomers kind of like start to like die off, do you think that we're going to move to a more and more of a renter nation because of what I'm alluding to, and because people want to value experiences and traveling around and being remote versus having home ownership, which is the quote unquote American dream?
I think two sides of it, right? So I think what you're saying makes a lot of sense, right? There's that one, right? But I also think it's going to get far-fetched for people to be able to afford their first home. It's going to get further out of reach, especially as institutional players come in and buy up the majority of homes, right? And so they're such doing a large realm. So yeah, I would agree, right? I love same thing. I owned, a couple hundred units before we bought a house, right? We were still renting because that's what we had always done. Coming out of New York City, you just rent in New York City, and that's what we had done. And so I think about that, I'm like, yeah. And the reason I pushed this and then, have a family, have kids now, just to get set in a place where they just had their home base, right? And so now it makes sense for me on that environment. But if you look at it, homes are getting more expensive. The wage gap from where people were buying homes 40 years ago to where they are today, right? People aren't buying their first home at 22, right? They're barely going to afford their first home at 32, right? And so it's going to take a long time for them to get into their first home, even if they want to do that. So it's going to push them to rent more.